Welcome to another session of the Daily Bytes. I'm Philip, and today I want to show you a bit about performance and logging and metrics of your Elastic Cloud cluster. So to see how your cluster is doing, how you're doing performance-wise, what might be happening in your logs. So to share my screen, by default, what you have in all your cloud deployments is under performance of your deployment. You have an overview of how you're doing in CPU credits, number of requests, search response times. Those are all nice and okay, but they only reach back for 24 hours. You can zoom into something more interesting like this spike here to figure out what is going on. You also have logs in your Cloud Console where you see the logs of the last 24 hours and you can search in them. But that's not necessarily all you want. So for a while now in Elastic Cloud, we've also had the concept that you can log from one Elastic Cloud cluster to another one. To continue the work that Alex has done with Terraform, I have, like in every good cooking show, prepared something for you. So I have set up here a monitoring deployment. So this is the one that is called monitoring cluster, and I'll show you in the Cloud Console in a moment using the current version. And this is just a small deployment with Elasticsearch and Kibana. And then we have the so-called production setup here, which is of the same size, but that doesn't really matter. And the important thing here is that it has this extra section about observability, where I reference this other monitoring deployment from above. And then I can set logging and metrics to true, those are the default values. And I can just reference one cluster for this observability to the other. So what that looks like in the Cloud Console. And before I jump to the Cloud Console, so I've already created this because it takes a couple of minutes to create first the one deployment and then the other one. Let's add some load here. I'm just generating some load. If you have never seen that, that load generating thing, it's from my colleague David. He has called something called the injector. So this is generating a bit of load on my cluster here. And now let's see in my deployments, I have the monitoring cluster and the production cluster. So the monitoring cluster is the one that monitors the other one, and the production cluster is where I insert my data and generate some load right now. So let's start off in this monitoring cluster here. Let's just open Kibana and see what's going on. Once Kibana is open, I will explore this on my own. And the section you probably want to go first to is the stack monitoring. And in the stack monitoring, as you might expect, we are monitoring the other cluster. So this one here is monitoring the production cluster that I've just shown you before. It is giving you an overview of what is happening in Kibana and also on Elasticsearch in the Elasticsearch nodes. And you can see I've just started this injector script to generate a bit more load, and you can see how your cluster is behaving here. And you could zoom into that one to see how that's going. It also tells you that here, these are the last few logs. And then in the logs view, we can actually see a bit more. The logs view is actually quite nice because it supports streaming. So we can just follow along whatever is happening here in my logs. And then you can also dive into that data a bit more and see the kind of event category or event data set that we have here. So let's see what event data sets we have available for the logs. And this one here, for example, tells me I have a deprecation log, a garbage collection log, the server log, a slow log, and the Kibana log. So depending on which data set you focus on, you could just, for example, see only what is happening in Kibana. Sometimes it needs a page reload because it misbehaves. That can happen. Or, for example, I could just say, I'm interested in the deprecation log. If you reload that page again, you see in the deprecation log what is actually being deprecated here. If you get this page, reload the page. Sometimes this one doesn't want to play along like right now, especially when streaming. If you stop streaming and then reload this one, you can scroll through all the pages. What I have also done on the other instance, the production instance, I have created or enabled the slow log. So in the slow log, I have actually just run two very simple queries. But here, for example, you see I have run on the person index. I have just got fetched 10 results from that person index. And you see in the slow log how long it took. So this helps you to figure out which queries are slow over a certain threshold. All of that should give you a much better idea, like how is your production cluster behaving. So in your monitoring cluster, you can actually see how this is working. If you go back to the Cloud Console, how this is actually configured in the Cloud Console, just to give you the visual overview of what we have here, you have under logs and metrics. On this cluster, we don't see the logs below anymore, but you can see we have logs and metrics shipping enabled to another cluster, and these would take us to the Kibana dashboard I've just shown you. And when you edit that, you could disable either one of them, and you can pick any other cluster where these logs should be shipped to. You could even ship it to the same deployment, which is obviously not recommended, because if that one goes down, you won't see what is up with that cluster. But it is a possibility to ship to any cluster in the same region, ship your logs and or metrics. One final tip, when you upgrade, those should be in sync. Upgrade the logging 2 cluster first. Otherwise, the main cluster might not actually be able to upgrade. You might get an obscure log message or error message, or you might get a more or better one by now. We have made some fixes around that, but just be aware, if you have this connection, it can add some extra dependencies around it in terms of upgrading. And that's it for the very quick introduction to logging and metrics for your Elastic Cloud cluster. Thanks again for watching today. See you again tomorrow.